Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Ganaganatam Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Ganaganatam Prapta Sakhalyanam Guranavasya Bande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Pratasaka Guranavasya Bande Guru Shri Charanara Bande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam 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 Mahaprabhu ki Tananita Gita Varitramadhyam Manasurasena Romanchakam Pastru Taranga Bhajo Bande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Romanchakam Pastru Taranga Bhajo Bande Guru Shri Vigrara Tananitanana Shringaratanma Niramajanado Shri Vigrara Jukta Sabhaktam Sa Niyunjatopi Bande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavat Prasada Swatanatriptan Hari Bhakta Sangha Kritvaiva Trupti Bhajata Shadeva Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Shradikama Davayara Para Madhurya Leela Gunarupa Namna Pratikshana Svam Danalalupasya Bande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Ne Kunjayuno Rati Kelisidhyai Jayali Bhir Juktir Apekshaniya Ne Kunjayuno Jayali Bhir Juktir Tatrati Daksha Oti Balavasya Bande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam साक्षाद्धरित्वेन समस्तशास्त्रे रुक्तास्तथाव गतैव सर्वे किन्तु प्रवर्ज प्रिय एव तस्य वन्दे गुरश्री चरणरविन्दं यस्य प्रसाद भगवत् प्रसाद यस्य प्रसादं न गति कुतोऽपि ध्यायं स्तुवं तस्य यस्त्रिसन्ध्यं वन्दे गुरश्री चरणरविन्दं वन्दे गुरश्री चरणरविन्दं वन्दे गुरश्री चरणरविन्दं नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने नमः विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पचतरि शतरिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासारि गौर भक्तवृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासारि गौर भक्तवृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासारि गौर भक्तवृंद Shri Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hariyaraye Namah Krishna Jadavaye Namah Hariyaraye Namah Jadavaye Madhavaye Kesavaye Namah Gopal Govinda Ram Shri Madhusudan Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohan Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Sita Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita Shri Rupa Sanatan Vatara Guna Shri Jiva Gopala Bhakta Dasara Guna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Shri Shri Radha, Nila Madhava Radha, Nila Madhava Radhe. Jaya Jagannath, Jayo Baladeva, Jayo Subhadrama, Jayo Sudarshan Chakra. Jaya Sitaram, Jaya Sitaram, Sitaram, Jayo Lakshman Hanuman. Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha, Lakshmi Narasingha, Jayo Lakshmi Narasingha, Jayo Prahlad Maharaj. Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo, Haribo. Jai Vishupara Paramahansa Prabhupada Acharya Stutara Sarashishi Maharaj Divine Grace Abhay Charavina Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Pratishta Bhiviti Samstapaka Acharya Vaishnava Shiromani Patita Pavana Srila Prabhupada Ji Maharaj Ki Jai Shri Gauriya Guru Varga Patiti Udhar Ki Jai Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunatha Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Guna Sadgoswami Prabhu Ki Jai Nama Acharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ji Ki Jai Nantakur Vaishnava Vrindi Ki Jai प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री द्वैत गदाधार शिवासरि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय जय परम दयाल से नित्यानंद प्रभु की जय जय प्रमनाम संकीर्तन एक जनक प्रेम पुरुषोत्तम श्री सच्चिनंदन श्रीमन गौरंग चैतन्य महाप्रभु गौर हरि महावृणावतार की जय गौलकेर प्रमधान हरि नाम संकीर्तन जग की जय जुग धर्म हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय बृहत मिदांग ट्रांसलेट बुक डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन सेवा की जय श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप राधा कुंड श्याम कुंड गिरिराज गोवर्धन की जय श्री ब्रज भूमि वृंदावन मथुर धाम की जय तेलो शिव श्री राधा नीला माधव की जय श्री श्री मायापुर नवद्वीप चक्र धाम की जय परम करुणा श्री श्री गौर निताय की जय श्री पुरुषोत्तम चित्र जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय श्री जगन्नाथ स्वामी बलदेव प्रभु सुभद्रदेव सुदर्शन चक्र भगवान की जय श्री राम लक्ष्मण भक्त हनुमान जी की जय भक्ति सर्व विघ्न विनाशन करुण श्रृंगरे भगवान की जय जगंगा माय जमुना माई की जय तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी भक्ति देवी की जय श्री मथुरा रानी की जय समवेत भक्त वृंद की जय निताय गौर हरि प्रेमानंद हरि all glories to the assembly bodies all glories to the assembly bodies all glories to the assembly bodies all glories all glories all glories to Shri Shri Guru Shri Gauranga.
Namaste Narasimhaya
Namaste Narasimhaya
Praladaladanam Hiranyakashi Purvakshaha Shilatangana Kalayin Ito Narsimha Parato Narsimha यतो यतो यामि ततो नरसिंह बहिर्नरसिंह हृदये नरसिंह नरसिंहमदिं शरणं प्रपद्ये तव करकमलहरे नकम् अद्भुतशृङ्गां दलिता हिरण्यकशिपुं तनुभृङ्गां केशवधृता नरहरिरूप जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे तव करकमलहरे नकम् अद्भुतशृङ्गां दलिता हिरण्यकशिपु केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय नरसिंहदेव 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 जय नरसिंहदेव जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय गुरुदेव 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 जय गुरुदेव अश्वदेव भगवान की जय भक्त प्रहलाद महाराज की जय
श्री वृंदाय तुलसी देवाय प्रिय केशव सत विष्णु भक्ति प्राणे देवी सतवताय नमो नमः वृंदाय तुलसी देवाय प्रिय केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्राणे देवी सतवताय नमो नमः वृंदायै तुलसी देवाय प्रिययै केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रदे देवी शतवताय नमो नमः। श्रीमती तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी की।
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रियासी नमो नमः
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रियसी नमो नमः।
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाओ ऐ अभिलाषी
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाओ ऐ अभिलाषी
राधा कृष्ण
जे तमारा शरण लो तारा वंचा पूर्ण हो कृपा करी कर तारे वृंदावन वासी मोरा ये बिलास कुंज दियो वा नयने हरिबो सदा जुगल रूप राशि ऐ निवेदन धरो सखीर अनुगत गुरु सेवाधिकार दिए करो निज दासी दीना कृष्ण दास कोए ऐ जिना मोरा होए श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेम सदा ये न भासी श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेम सदा ये न भासी कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्याधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ते प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ते प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ते प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ते प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ते प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani.
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani.
Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi.
Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi.
Nitai Gora Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gora Hari Bol.
Jai Gora Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Jai Gora Hari Bol.
Shri Vrinda Devi Tulsi Maharani ki.
Jai. Shri Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priyai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satavatai Namaha. Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priyai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satavatai Namaha. Vrindayai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satavatai Srimati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki. Oh Tulasi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire to attend the service for Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of me as wish was fulfilled. Bestow your mercy upon him, you make him resident of Vrindavan. My desire is that you also give me a residence like the groves of Shri Vrindavan. Last within my vision and always before you, Krishna. I beg you to aid me and follow the guidance of Christ. May I always sing love of Shri Radha and Govinda, Shri Mati Tulsi, Vrinda Devi. Shri Chaitanya चैतन्य महाप्रभु श्री कृष्ण की चेतो चैतन्य महाप्रभु श्री कृष्ण की जय। नमो महावीराय कृष्ण प्रेम प्रदाय कृष्णाय कृष्ण चैतन्य नाम glory to Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart with the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life or repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan moment is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because its praise raised at the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which always anxious, O my Lord. Your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds of millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names you have invested all your transcendental energies. There is no even hard and fast rule for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by holy names. But I'm so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. Once you chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself a Lord on throne and street, one should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotion of service birth after birth. O Son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor, yet somehow or other I am falling in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love, flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? Will my voice choke up, and will the hairs and my body stand on end at the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I feel all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he should remain so. Even if someone puts me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me, he is completely free to do anything and everything. He is always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. Shri Shri Shikastakam Ki Jai. There are 10 offenses in matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord that must be avoided. They are as follows. 1. Our streaming bodies we dedicate our life to propagating the holy name of the Lord, to consider names of the living gods, for Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, to be cultural independent of the name of Lord Vishnu, free, to display the orders of the spiritual master, war, blaspheme the Vedic literature, or literatures in pursuance of Vedic version, 5. To consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna to the imagination, 6. To give some interpretation on the holy name of the Lord, 7. To commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy name of the Lord, 8. To consider the chanting of Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which are offered in Vedas as fruitive activity karma kanda, 9. To strike the fullest expression by the glories of holy name, and 10. To not have complete faith in chanting the holy names, and to maintain material attachments, ignorant from understanding so many instructions on this matter. It does so no offense to be insensible of chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully guard against the stand offenses in order to quickly achieve the desires of Sage Krishna. Now let us offer our humble obeisance unto all the Vaishnavas, devotees of the Lord. They are just like desired trees, they can fulfill the desires of everyone, and therefore the compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. From child to Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadhyasvetam Vayaditaratascha Svavigyasvara
Tene Brahma Hridaya Adhikavaye Muhyanti Apsuraya
Tenne Brahma Rudaya Adhikavaye Mojanti Jasuraya Tejupnida Nimayo Jatra Trisagumrasya Dhamna Svina Sada Nirastakuhakam Satyang Param Dhimahi. O my Lord Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva, O prevailing personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisance unto you. I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the
and the
absolute
primeval
truth,
cause of all causes,
and the primeval cause of all
of
causes,
creation, sustenance, and destruction of manifested universe,
of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of manifested universe.
is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
And he is independent because there's no other cause beyond him.
And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him.
It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji,
It is the only person part of the Vedic knowledge unto
the
heart of
original
Brahma,
living being.
the original living being.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into
As
illusion.
one is bewildered by the illusory representation
As one is bewildered by the illusory
of water seen
representation
on fire or land seen on water.
of water in the fire, of land in the water.
Only because of him do the material universes,
Only because of him do the material universe.
temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature,
Temporarily manifested by the reaction of the two modes of
appear
nature.
factual although they aren't real.
Appear factual, although they are
I
unreal.
therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna,
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord
who
Shri,
is eternally existent in the transcendental abode,
who is eternally existent in the transcendental
which is
abode,
forever free from the illusory representations in the material world.
which is forever free from the illusory representation of
I
material
meditate
world.
upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute
Dharma projita kaitruvotra,
Dharma Pujita Kaitavutta
paramo nirmatsaranam satam,
Paramo Nirmashanam
vedyam vastavam atravastu,
Vedam Vastavam Astavam
shivadam tapatrayon muvanam,
Shivadam Tapo
Shrimad Bhagavate Mahamani Krite,
Shrimad Bhagavate Mahamani
Kim
Kriti,
Vapur
Kim
Ishvaraha,
Vaparirishvara
Sadyo Hridi Avarudhyate Tra,
Satyavruddhya
Kriti
Varidhyatitra
Vihi Sususa Bistakshana.
Kriti Shushushuvistatra,
Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
completely rejecting all religious activity which are material
This
motivated.
Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth,
This Bhagavad Purana propounds the
which
highest
is
truth,
understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in
The
heart.
highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
The highest truth, the reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare
Such
of all.
truth uproots the threefold mysteries.
Such truth uproots the threefold misery.
This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in in its maturity.
This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by Krishna Vyasadeva is
It's
mature.
sufficient in itself for God realization.
It's sufficient itself for God realization.
What is the need of any other scripture?
What is the need of the other scripture?
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam,
As soon as one attentively submissively hears the message of
by this
Bhagavatam,
culture of knowledge,
by this
the
culture,
Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
the Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam.
Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam.
Sukamukad amrita dravya sangitam.
Shukamukad amrita dravya
Pibata
sangitam.
Bhagavatam rasam alayam.
Pibata Bhagavatam rasam.
Muhur aho raska bhuvibhavaka.
Murahora Shikab Vivabhuka.
O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad
O
Bhagavatam,
expert and thoughtful man, relish Srimad
the
Bhagavatam.
mature fruit of the desire to read Vedic literatures.
The mature fruit of the desire to the Vedic
It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami.
It emanated from the lips of Shri Sukadeva.
Therefore, this fruit is even more tasteful.
Therefore, this is tasteful.
Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all,
Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all,
including liberated souls.
including liberated soul.
Shinvatam Swakata Krishna,
Shramvatam Swakata Krishna.
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Punya Shravana Kirtana.
Hidyantak Stohi Bhadrani,
Hidyantastu Hyabhadrani.
Vidonati Suhit Satam.
Vidunati
To hear about
Suri.
Krishna from Vedic literature,
To hear about Krishna from the Vedic.
or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita,
Or to hear from it directly through the
is
Bhagavad
itself righteous activity.
Gita. Itself right is
And for
activity.
one who hears about Krishna,
And for one who hears about
Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart,
Lord Krishna who is dwelling within everyone's heart,
acts as a best wishing friend
acts as the best wishing
and
friend,
purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him.
and purifies the devotee who constantly engages in
Nasta
hearing.
presu bhadresu
Nasta Preshwabhadeshu.
nityam bhagavata sevaya
Nityam Bhagavata
bhagavati uttama sloke
Bhagavati Uttama
bhakti
Sloke.
bhavati naistaki.
Bhakti Bhavati Nastiki.
In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
In this way, the devotee naturally develops dormant transcendental
As he hears
knowledge.
more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavad
and from the devotees,
and from the
he
devotees,
becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
he becomes fixed in devotional service to the Lord.
Tadarajastamo bhava
Tadarajastamo
kamalobhatayasche
Kamalobhadayashe.
cheta etaranavidam
Cheta
sthitam sattve prasidati.
Stitam Sadve Prasidati.
By development of devotional service,
By development of devotional service,
one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance,
one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance.
and thus material lust and avarice are diminished.
And thus mature last and average that diminished.
Evam prasana manaso
Evam prasannamanaso.
bhagavat bhakti yogitaha
Bhagavad Bhakti Yoga.
bhagavat tattva vijnanam
Bhagavad Tattva Vijnana.
mukta sangasya jayate.
Mukta Sangasya Jayate.
By development of devotional service,
By
I'm sorry,
develop-
when these impurities are wiped away,
When all these impurities are wiped away,
the candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness,
the candidate remains steady in the position of pure goodness,
becomes enlivened by devotional service,
becomes enlivened by devotional
and
service,
understands the science of God perfectly.
and understands the science of God.
Vidyate hridaya grantis,
Vidyate Hridaya Grantis.
chidyante sarva samsaya,
Chidyante Sarva
seyante
Samsaya.
jasya karamani,
Chidyante Chasya Karmani.
krista evatmanishvare.
Krista Evadmaneshwari.
Thus, Bhakti Yoga serves the heart not of material affection,
That's the Bhakti Yoga service, the harm of the
and
material
enables
affection,
one to come at once to the stage of a samsayam samagnam,
and enables one to come at once to the stage of assumption.
understanding of the supreme absolute truth, personality of Godhead.
Understanding the supreme absolute truth personality. of
Therefore,
God.
only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotees in Krishna
can one
consciousness
understand the science of Krishna.
can one understand the science of Krishna.
Shri Guru Vastika prayers, Ki Jai. The spiritual master is receiving benediction from the ocean of mercy, just as a cloud pours water on a forest fire to extinguish it.
Spiritual master receiving benediction from the ocean of mercy, just as cloud pours water on the forest fire to
So the
extinguish it.
spiritual master delivers the materially afflicted world by extinguishing the blazing fire of material existence.
So the spiritual master delivers the material afflicted world by extinguishing the blazing fire of material
I,
existence.
for my respectful obeisance unto Lotus Feet of such spiritual master is an ocean of auspicious qualities.
Offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master who is an ocean of species qualities.
Chanting the holy name, dancing in ecstasy, singing and playing musical instruments.
Chanting the holy name, dancing in ecstasy, singing and playing musical
The
instruments.
spiritual master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
The spiritual master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan moment of Lord Chaitanya
Because
Mahaprabhu.
he's relishing the mellows of pure devotion within his heart,
Because
within his
he's
mind.
relishing the mellows of pure devotion within his mind.
Sometimes his hair stands on end.
Sometimes his hair stands on
He
end.
feels quivering in his body.
He feels quivering in his
And
body.
tears flow from his eyes
And
like
tears
waves.
flow from his eyes like waves.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such spiritual
The
master.
spiritual master is always engaged in the temple worship of Shri Shri Radha and Krishna.
The spiritual master is always engaged in the temple worship of Shri Shri Radha.
He also
and Krishna.
engages his disciples in such worship.
He also engages his disciples in such
They
worship.
dress the deities in beautiful clothes and ornaments,
They dress the deities in beautiful clothes and
clean
ornaments,
their temple,
clean their temple,
and perform other similar worship of the Lord.
and perform other similar worship of
I
the
offer my
Lord.
respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet
The
of such a
spiritual master is
spiritual
always
master.
offering Krishna 4 kinds of delicious food.
The spiritual master is always offering Krishna 4 kinds of delicious food.
Analyzes that which is licked, chewed, drunk, and sucked.
Analyze that which is licked, chewed, and drunk and sucked.
When the spiritual master sees that the devotees are satisfied by eating Bhagavad Prasada,
When the spiritual master sees that the devotees are satisfied by eating Bhagavad Prasad,
he is satisfied.
he is
I
satisfied.
offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual
The
master.
spiritual master is always eager to hear and chant about the unlimited conjugal pastimes of Radhika and Madhava,
The spiritual master is always eager to hear and chant about unlimited conjugal pastimes, Radhika,
and their qualities, names, and forms.
and their qualities, names, and forms.
Spiritual master aspires to relish these at every moment.
The spiritual master aspires to relish these at every moment.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual
The
master.
spiritual master is very dear because he is expert in assisting the gopis who at different times make different tasteful arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna's conjugal loving affairs within the groves of Vrindavan.
The spiritual master is very dear because he's expert in assisting the gopis who in different time make different tasteful arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna's conjugal loving affairs within the groves of
I
Vrindavan.
offer my most humble obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master.
I offer my respectful obeisance to the lotus feet of such a spiritual master.
The spiritual master is to be honored as much as the Supreme Lord because he is the most confidential servitor of the Lord.
The spiritual master is to be honored as much as the Supreme Lord because he's the most confidential servant of the Lord.
This is acknowledged by all revealed scriptures and followed by all authorities.
This is acknowledged in all revealed scriptures and followed by all authorities.
Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master who is a bona fide representative of Sri Hare Krishna.
Therefore, I offer my humble obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master who is a bona fide representative of Sri Hare Krishna.
By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna.
By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna.
Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement.
Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement.
Therefore, I offer my Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master.
Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master.
At least 3 times a day, I should offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master.
At least 3 times a day, I should offer my respectful obeisance to the Lord to my spiritual master.
Shri Brahma Samhita ki jai, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchitananda Vigraha Anadiraja Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam.
Ishvara Parama Krishna Sakchit Ananda Vigraha Anadi Radir Govinda Sarvakarana Karana
Chintamani Prakara Satma Sukalpa Vriksha
Chintamani Prakara Satma Sukalpa Vriksha
Raksha Vrite Susuravi Rabitaliyantam
Lakshya Vrite Sisurabhira Vipalayantam
Lakshmi Sahasra Sata Sambrama Sevyamanam
Lakshmi Sahasra Sata Sambrama Sevam
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham
Venam
Bhajami
Pavanda Arvinda Dalaya Taksham
Venu Kwanantam Aravinda Dalayitaksha
Parhavratam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam
Paramvata Samasitam Buddha Sundaranga
Gandarpakoti Kamaniya Vishesha Sobham
Gandapakotika Maniya Vishesha Shobham
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Alola Chandra Kalasadvanamalya Vamsi
Alola Chandra Kalasarvanamalya Vamsi
Radham Gadam Pranayakeli Kalavilasam
Ranangadam Pranayakeli Kalavilasam
Jyamam Tribanga Lalitani Yata Prakasam
Syamam Tribhanga Lalitam Niyata Prakasham
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Angani Yasya Sakalendriya Vritti Manti
Angani Yasya च सकलेन्द्रियवृत्तिमन्ति
Pasyanti panti kalayanti chiram jaganti
पश्यन्ति पन्ति कलयन्ति चिरं जगन्ति
Ananda chinmaya sadujvala vigrahasya
आनन्दचिन्मय सदुज्ज्वलविग्रहस्य
Govindamadi purisham tamaham bhajami
गोविन्दम् आदिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि
Advaitam achyutam anadim anantarupam
अद्वैतम् अच्युतम् अनादिम् अनन्तरूपम्
Adyam purana purusham navayovanam cha
आद्यं पुराणपुरुषं नवयौवनं च
Vede sudurlabam adurlabam atma bhakto
वेदेषु दुर्लभमदुर्लभम् आत्मभक्तो
Govindamadi purisham tamaham bhajami
गोविन्दम् आदिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि
Pantastu koti satavatsara sampragamyo
पन्तस्तु कोटिशतवत्सरसम्प्रगाम्यो
Ayoratapi manaso munipungamanam
वायुरतापि मनसो मुनिपुङ्गवानम्
Sobhyasti yad prapadasimya vichintya tattve
सोऽप्यसि यप्रवदसिं चिञ्च तद्वे
Govindamadi purisham tamaham bhajami
गोविन्दम् आदिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि
Ekopya sora chayitam jagadanda kotim
एकोऽप्यसो रचयितुं जगदन्तकोटिम्
Yashaktirasti jagadanda chayayadanta
यशक्तिरस्ति जगनन्द चय जगन्त
Adantarasta paramanu chayantarastam
अनन्तरं परमानुयन्तरतस्तम्
Govindamadi purisham tamaham bhajami
गोविन्दम् आदिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि
Yad bhava bhavita diyo manajastataiva
यद्भावभावितधियो मनुजस्तथैव
Samprapya rupa mahima sanayana bhusaha
सम्प्राप्य रूपमहिमा शनयानभूष
Suktaryameva nigama pratitaistavanti
शुक्तिर्यमेव निगमा प्रतितं सुतं
Govindamadi purisham tamaham bhajami
गोविन्दम् आदिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि
Ananda chinmaya rasa pratibhavatabhes
आनन्दचिन्मयरसप्रतिभाविता
Tabilya eva nijarupataya kalabi
ताभिर्य एव निजरूपजालकाभि
Loka eva nivasata kilatma bhuto
लोक एव निवसत्यखिलात्मभूतो
Govindamadi purisham tamaham bhajami
गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि
Manjana churita bhakti vilochanena
प्रेमाञ्जनच्युरितभक्तिविलोचनेन
Santaksadeva hidayesu vilokayanti
सन्तः सदैव हृदयेषु विलोकयन्ति
Yam chama sundaram achintya gunaswarupam
यं श्यामसुन्दरमचिन्त्य गुणस्वरूपं
Govindamadi purisham tamaham bhajami
गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि
Ramadi murti sukalani amena tistan
रामादिमूर्तिषु कलानि यमेन तिष्ठन्
Anavatar makarod bhuvanesu kintu
नानावतारमकरोद्भुवनेषु किन्तु
Krishna swayam samabhavat paramam pumam yo
कृष्ण स्वयं सम्भवात् परमां पुमान्यो
Govindamadi purisham tamaham bhajami
गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि
Yasya prabhavato jagananda koti
यश प्रभा प्रभवतो जगनन्दकोटि
Kotisvasesu vasudadi vibhuti vinam
कोट्यश्वशेष वसुधादिविभूतिवीनम्
Tad brahma niskalam anantam asesa bhutam
तद्ब्राह्मनिष्कलमनन्तमशेषभूतं
Govindamadi purisham tamaham bhajami
गोविन्दम् आदिपुरुषं तमहं
Maya hiyasya jagadanda satani sute
माया यस्य जगनन्दशतानि सुते
Trigunya tad vishaya veda vitayamanam
त्रिगुणतद्विषयवेदवितायमानं
Sattvam pralambi satyam visuddha sattvam
सद्भावलम्बि परसद्वविशुद्धसत्त्वं
Govindamadi purisham tamaham bhajami
गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि
Ananda chinmaya rasatmataya manasu
आनन्दचिन्मयरसात्मनतायं
Ya praninam pratifalam smaratam upetya
या प्राणिनं प्रतिफलं स्मरतम् उपेत्य
Lilayatena bhuvanani jayaya jasram
लीलायितेन भुवनानि जय जजस्रम्
Govindamadi purisham tamaham bhajami
गोविन्दम् आदिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि
Golokanamni nijadamni chale chatasya
गोलोकनाम्नि निजधाम्नि तले च tasya
Devi Mahesu Haridama Sutesu Tesu
Devi Mahesha Haridama Suteshu Teshu
Te Prabhava Nichaya Vihitascha Yena
Te Prabhava Nichaya Vihitachayena
Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Shristi Stiti Pralaya Sadhana Sakti Reka
Shristi Stiti Pralaya Sadhana Shakti Reka
Jaye Vayasya Bhuvanani Vibharti Durga
Jaye Vayasya Bhuvanani Vibharti Durga
Ichchanu Rupam Apiyasya Chachesta Tesa
Ichanurupam Apiyasya Chachista Tesa
Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Shiram Yata Dadi Vikara Vishesha Yoga
Kiram Yata Tadi Vikara Vishesha Yoga
Sanjayate Nahitata Pritilaksti Hetu
Sanjayate Naitata Pritagasti Hetu
Ya Sambhutam Apitata Samapaiti Karyat
Yasambudam Apitata Samupaiti Karya
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Hiparchir Eva Hita Santaram Abhyupetya
Depachi Eva Sasantaram Amupapetya
Dipayate Vivita Hetu Samanu Dharma
Dipayate Vivita Hetu Samana Dharma
Yastadrigeva Hicha Vishnu Taya Vibhati
Yastadrigeva Icha Vishnu Taya Vibhati
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Yakarnanava Jala Bhajati Sma Yoga
Yakarana Narvajale Vajitasma Yoga
Nidram Ananta Jagaranda Saroma Kupa
Nidram Ananta Jagananda Saroma Kupa
Adharam Shaktim Avalambya Param Swamurtim
Adhara Shaktim Avalambya Param Swamurtim
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 2 Chapter 6 Verse number 11 Avyaktarasa Siddhunam
Avyaktaram
Bhutanam Nidanasya Cha
Bhutanam Nidanasya
Udaram Viditam Pumso
Udaram Viditam Pumso
Hridayam Manasapadam.
Rudaya Manasapadam.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada. The impersonal feature of the Lord is the abode of great oceans, and his belly is the resting place for the materially annihilated living entities. His heart is the abode of the subtle material bodies of living beings. Thus it is known by the intelligent class of men. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. In the Bhagavad Gita, 8th chapter, text 17 and 18, it is stated that according to human calculations, one day of Brahma is equal to 1,000 ages of 4 millenniums. 4,300,000 years. Each and the same period is calculated to be his night also. A Brahma lives for 100 such years and then dies. A Brahma who is generally a great devotee of the Lord attains liberation after such a downfall. The universe, called the Brahmanda, or the round football-like domain controlled by a Brahma, is thus annihilated, and thus the inhabitants of a particular planet or of the whole universe are also annihilated. Avyakta, mentioned herein in this verse, means the night of Brahma, when partial annihilation takes place, and the living entities of that particular Brahmanda up to the planets of Brahma Loka, along with the big oceans, etc., all repose in the belly of the Virat Purusha. At the end of a Brahma's night, the creation again takes place, and the living entities reserved within the belly of the Lord are let loose to play their respective parts as if being awakened from a deep slumber. Since the living entities are never destroyed, the annihilation of the material world does not annihilate the existence of the living entities. But until liberation is attained, one has to accept one material body after another again and again. The human life is meant for making a solution to this repeated change of bodies, and thereby attaining a place in the spiritual sky, where everything is eternal, blissful, and full of knowledge. In other words, the subtle forms of the living being entities take place in the heart of the Supreme Being, and such forms take tangible shape at the time of creation. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The impersonal feature of the Lord is the abode of great oceans, and his belly is the resting place for the materially annihilated living entities. His heart is the abode of the subtle material bodies of living beings. Thus it is known by the intelligent class of men. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So this is very detailed information about so many things that modern scientists and philosophers don't understand. They have zero understanding of this. Because they're envious of the Lord, therefore, even if they hear this, they refuse to accept it. That's a symptom of very envious people, as we discussed yesterday. And because of that, the scientists speculate all the time, making up incomplete and inconsistent theories, and then junking those theories and coming up with more speculative, inconsistent, incomplete theories. However, here, there's no guessing, there's no speculation. This is the absolute truth, because it's spoken by Sukadeva Goswami, the son of Vyasadeva, who is a literary incarnation of Krishna, and who compiled and wrote all of the Vedic literature, and then and taught his son Sukadeva Goswami this knowledge, and then Sukadeva Goswami explained to Sutta Goswami, Sutta Goswami explained to Sanaka Rishi and the great sages of Naimisharanya, and thus this knowledge has been preserved through disciplic succession up till today, and by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, he's translated it correctly without any mistakes into the English language, and therefore we're able to read this and understand it in plain English. So this is all the plan of the Lord, because Dharmam to Shakshat Bhagavat Pranitam, the Lord is in charge of maintaining the principles of religion. So whenever there are discrepancies in the practice of the spiritual practices, Krishna either comes himself or sends a expansion of himself, or empowers an individual like Vyasadeva to do an impossible feat of compiling and writing all the Vedas, or he'll empower another living entity like the great Goswamis, or Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, or Bhaktivinoda Thakur, or Srila Prabhupada, to give an example of a pure devotee and the marvelous achievements one can attain by becoming purified through chanting Hare Krishna, which is the Yoga Dharma, or the recommended way in this age of Kali Yuga, which is most inauspicious for making spiritual advancement. Therefore, a special dispensation has been made by the Lord to make the process extremely easy for honest people who want to stop the cycle of birth and death and go back to where we came from, which is the spiritual world, or Goloka Vrindavan. So, but we are in the throes of the laws of nature, and the laws of nature, summarized as birth, death, old age, and disease, limit our ability to understand our real situation. That's why saintly persons like Srila Prabhupada have been sent by Krishna and empowered by him in order to instruct us correctly in how to understand our position in the material world, how to understand our relationship with Krishna. In other words, understand where we have come from, where we are, and especially what we should aspire to be, and how to attain that liberation from the cycle of birth and death, which is the ultimate goal of human life. The human body is especially meant for self-realization, to understand ourselves in relationship to Krishna, to the material world, to other living entities, and also how to progress in the gradual process of liberation from the modes of material nature, from the devastating effects of time, and live a spiritual life free of these limiting influences by engaging in full devotional service without any hesitation. So, let's see. In the printer, you'll see some pages. Bring them here. So, in the 8th chapter, 18th and 19th verse, this is explained in depth. I'm sorry, 17th and 18th verse. This is explained in depth. How, at least, we are situated in the material world, and then how we can become liberated from it. So it says, Sahasra Yuga Paryantam Ahar Yad Brahmano Vidu Ratrim Yuga Sahasrantam Te Ho Ratra Vido Janan. So this is 8th chapter, 17th verse. And it says, by human calculation, 1,000 ages taken together form the duration of Brahma's one day, and such also is the duration of his night. So, what does this mean? Lord Brahma is empowered by Krishna as a secondary creator. Krishna is the primary creator, and then he creates the earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and so forth. And then Brahma picks up that knowledge, understands his eternal relationship with Krishna, and receives the knowledge by which he can set in motion the material creation after the primary creation is done by Krishna, and then populate the universes, his universe, with living entities. But there are innumerable Brahmas and innumerable material universes that are created by Krishna. And then Krishna impregnates the living entities by his glancing into the material nature, into the womb of Durga Mata, and by the channel of Lord Shiva, and then living entities and all the different types of living entities are placed into the 8,400,000 different species of life, or different types of bodies, and they're placed in those bodies according to their previous karma and previous creation. So this is a complicated process. It's way beyond the scope of understanding of most people, even the greatest scientists, because Krishna is Ananta. He's unlimited. So he can expand unlimited numbers of material universes, unlimited numbers of Brahma, unlimited numbers of Mahavishnu, Garbhodakshay Vishnu, and Kshirodakshay Vishnu, unlimited numbers of demigods, and unlimited numbers of jivas, or individual souls, and reward them or punishment according to their previous karma. The whole enterprise is bewildering to normal people because we live in such a limited time-space module that hearing about such unlimited activities is unimaginable for us. It's just like the frog in the well. He cannot imagine the length and breadth of the Pacific Ocean. So he tries to measure it in terms of bloating his own body, which is what he understands. And eventually he explodes by trying to measure the ocean with his limited understanding. So in this purport it says the duration of the material universe is limited. It is manifested in cycles of kalpas. A kalpa is a day of Brahma. So Brahma lives for 100 years, but his daytime is like 12 hours of light, and his nighttime is 12 hours of darkness. So in that 12 hours of his daytime, there are 1,000 cycles of 4 ages. So one cycle of 4 ages is called a kalpa, and that lasts for 4,300,000 years, and it's divided into 4 yugas. So there's Satya Yuga, and Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga. So Satya Yuga lasts for 1,728,000 years, and Treta Yuga for 206,000 years, and then Dwapara Yuga 864,000 years, and Kali Yuga 432,000 years. So we're in Kali Yuga right now, approximately 5,000 years into this age. That's going to last another 428,000 years, or 427,000 years. So we see these are astronomical numbers, and one day of Brahma is 1,000 cycles, or 1,000 cycles of 4 ages, or 1,000 kalpas. So that means that one day of Brahma is equal to 4,320,000,000 years. Now, this is unimaginable for people, right? But these are facts according to the Vedic scriptures. And then his night is the same duration, 4,320,000,000 years, a million years. And then, so that's one complete day of Brahma, and he there's a month, so you multiply it by 30, and there's a year, you multiply that by 12, and there's 100 years, you multiply that by 100. So you get the duration of time that Brahma lives, which is 311 trillion 40 billion years, or Earth years. So this is unimaginable. I mean, people have no way of understanding it. First of all, people don't even understand the deficit of the United States, which is up to about $28 trillion, right? But the deficit of the United States doesn't even compare to the duration of Brahma's life, which is 311 trillion 40 billion years, right? So how can people understand this? Well, only if they accept the authority of Vyasadeva and Sukadev Goswami, and the authority of the Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. So Bhagavad Gita is spoken by Krishna, so they have to accept the authority of Krishna, and then Srimad Bhagavatam is spoken by Sukadev Goswami, and they would have to accept the authority of Sukadev Goswami. Well, instead of accepting the authority of Krishna and Sukadev Goswami, people accept the authority of idiots like Einstein, or Spinoza, or Nietzsche, or Marx, or Darwin, or Freud. These are all phonies, very ignorant people, although people look up to them as great authorities. And when you accept an authority, that's when you begin to learn. It's not that you learn by studying. You learn by accepting someone as an authority. And then whatever they say, you believe it, because you believe they're an authority, they're an expert. Just like there's Dr. Fauci. Some people think he's an authority. Some people think he's a fake, a phony, a misinterpreter, who's purposely working for the Chinese. Now, what are you going to believe, right? Well, that's the whole point. You are who you accept, or you will become a person after you accept somebody as an authority, and you learn from that person or those persons. So we accept Krishna as an authority, and Vyasadeva and Sukadev Goswami and the Vaishnava Acharyas, and they accept Darwin, Freud, and Marx, and Fauci, and this one and that one. And that's why there's such a mess in this world today, because they're accepting misinterpreters, they're accepting speculators, they're accepting very imperfect persons. Just like Marx, when Marx was writing his Das Kapital, he was living in London in a small apartment. He had a wife and a kid, And he was so engrossed in his work that his kid died of starvation because he was relatively poor. He was just living off some donations. He refused to work because he was so dedicated to his work of creating a communist euphoria, which ended up being a communist complete debacle and ruined the lives of millions and millions of people. So we see how the Kali Yuga is an age of hypocrisy and quarrel. What does that mean? That means people are lying and they're quarreling with each other that they're not lying. That's what's happening in this age. And we see it all over the place. Politicians, doctors, philosophers, I call them philosophers, and scientists. Scientists cannot even get it out of a wet bag. He's so confused with all the different theories that he has. And therefore, they're always changing their theories. Bhagavad Gita hasn't changed since Krishna spoke it to Arjuna 5,000 years ago, but he spoke it before that to Manu and Ikshvaku, and then before that he spoke it to Manu, and before that he spoke it to the sun god hundreds and millions of years ago. Why has he spoken it so many times? Because over time things deteriorate, and that's why Krishna is in charge of maintaining the principles of spirituality. Therefore he has to speak it again and again to revive the right understanding. Just like Prabhupada has written this Bhagavad Gita as it is. In other words, when you read Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, it's the same Bhagavad Gita that Krishna spoke to Arjuna. It's the same conclusion that Arjuna came to, that I should surrender completely to the Lord and dedicate my whole life to serving him. So, so many Bhagavad Gitas. There's at least 600 translations of Bhagavad Gita since the 16th century into English. And not one person became Krishna conscious by reading those 600 interpretive translations of Bhagavad Gita. It's only when Prabhupada wrote Bhagavad Gita as it is that hundreds and thousands and millions of people have taken an interest in becoming devotees, and they have become devotees. Right? So we see how dangerous changing even one word of Krishna is. Just like the modern Brahmanas, we've explained this many times, they changed one word of the Bhagavad Gita. Chaturvanyam maya shishtam guna karma vibhagasa. So they changed the word guna to janma and created the false caste system that's followed today in India and has caused havoc in Sanatana Dharma, in the following of the principles of genuine spirituality. So, therefore, it says here that this duration of life of Lord Brahma is unimaginable for us. But if we accept the authority of Krishna, and that means you accept in toto everything he says, then you can understand by the mercy of Krishna, and especially if we chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, which purifies our mind and body of all these contaminating thoughts and desires and so-called theories by speculators. And then it purifies also all the reactions to our sinful lives in previous lifetimes and in this lifetime. Then we can understand. And this is not an academic process. It's not, you read this, you study this, you take a test, you have to answer the questions, and then you get some kind of a degree as if you're educated. I got all those degrees, but I realized I wasn't educated. Therefore, I kept seeking real knowledge. And when I met Prabhupada and his devotees, that's when I realized that my hunch that I was not really educated, even after graduating from an Ivy League college and everything, I realized I wasn't really educated. I didn't really understand anything about God or life in this world. So when I went seeking, I was, seek and ye shall find, as it says in the Bible. And I met the devotees and then eventually Prabhupada and got initiated. Then I realized that, this was what I was seeking. In fact, when I was a young boy, my auntie, my great auntie, because my mother was always working, so she let my great aunt, who's one who actually reared me through my infancy and childhood. One day she told me, she said, there is a great book called 6,000 Years of Wisdom. She said, if you ever can find this book and read it, you will be educated. So that stayed in my mind. This is like, almost 70 years ago. Right? But when I graduated college and I realized I didn't know anything, I had my degrees, but I didn't know anything. So, and I started looking around, and I traveled, and I eventually went to Europe, and then the Middle East, and then back to Europe, and then I met the devotees. And then one devotee was very kind to me. He sat with me and read Bhagavad Gita with me and answered my questions. Then I realized, wow, this is the book my great-grandmother was talking about. And what was that book? It was the Bhagavad Gita with Prabhupada's purports. And at that point I realized that this, what she called 6,000 Years of Wisdom, this is the original book, and the extension of that book is the Srimad Bhagavatam. So Srimad Bhagavatam is called Amala Purana. It means it is histories that are perfect with no mistakes. And Bhagavad Gita is directly spoken by Krishna. There's no mistakes in Bhagavad Gita when it's translated properly by a pure devotee like Srila Prabhupada. It's not like the 600 translations that existed before Prabhupada's translation, in which nobody actually became a devotee. But when Prabhupada wrote the Bhagavad Gita as it is, then people became devotees, and thousands and millions of people have become devotees. But devotees following the instructions of Lord Chaitanya, which is who's the most recent incarnation of Krishna, and said, in this age of Kali, one can attain all perfection simply by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra and following the rules and regulations of spiritual life. 4 don'ts and 4 do's. So, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila, there's some interesting points that are made. The 2nd chapter, 10th verse, and it says, in terms of his various manifestations, he is known in 3 features, called the impersonal Brahman, the localized Paramatma, and the original personality of Godhead. Right? So this is like a verse in Bengali that echoes the verse Vedanti tat tattvavidas tattvam yajganam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti uchite. So this is like the verse in the 1st canto, 2nd chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam. But this is the Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila, 2nd chapter, verse 10. So, in the purport, Prabhupada says, Srila Jiva Goswami has explained the word Bhagavan in his Bhagavat Sandarbha. The personality of Godhead, being full of all conceivable and inconceivable potencies, is the absolute supreme whole. Impersonal Brahman is a partial manifestation of the absolute truth realized in the absence of such complete potencies. The first syllable of the word Bhagavan is Ba, which means sustainer and protector. The next letter, Ga, means leader, pusher, and creator. Va means dwelling. All living beings dwell in the Supreme Lord, and the Supreme Lord dwells within the heart of every living being. Combining all these concepts, the word Bhagavan carries the import or the meaning of inconceivable potency in knowledge, energy, strength, opulence, power, and influence, devoid of all varieties of inferiority. Without such inconceivable potencies, one cannot fully sustain or protect. Our modern civilization is sustained by scientific arrangements devised by many great scientific brains. We can just imagine, therefore, the gigantic brain whose arrangements sustain the gravity of the unlimited number of planets and satellites, and who creates the unlimited space in which they float. If one considers the intelligence needed to orbit man-made satellites, if one considers the intelligence needed to orbit man-made satellites, one cannot be fooled into thinking that there is not a gigantic intelligence responsible for the arrangement of the various planetary systems. There is no reason to believe that all the gigantic planets float in space without the superior arrangement of a superior intelligence. By the way, I started writing a book about this exact subject. In other words, scientists, it took many scientists to put the first Sputnik into space. And the first Sputnik went into space and only lasted for about 22, 23 days. And it only weighed about, about 18 or 20 pounds. And it's orbited the Earth for, like I said, some 20 days. So it took thousands of, it was put into space by Russia, and at least 11 governmental agencies in Russia worked on it with hundreds of scientists and thousands of people to make that first little Sputnik. And it only was in space for like 20, 22 days, right? So now, let's compare the Sputnik to the planets, including the sun, who are in perfectly, in perfect orbits, perfectly synchronized, and we keep our time by the movement of the planets, right? And we have to correct our watches once a year according to the more exact and precise movement of the planets. And the planets, they're not 22 pounds or 24 pounds. They are hundreds and millions of pounds in gigantic orbits, and they're all perfectly synchronized. So now we can compare the brains of those hundreds of scientists and thousands of workers to make one Sputnik to the brain that has made these gigantic planets in unbelievable orbits, going at fabulous speeds, like the Earth is revolving on its axis about 1,200 miles an hour. The Earth is revolving around the sun for about, I think it's 20,000 miles an hour or something like that. It's some fabulous number. And then the sun and the entire galaxy is revolving around the polar axis of the universe around 400,000 miles an hour. So all these movements are going on synchronized. Do you feel any shaking? If your car goes 100 miles an hour, it starts shaking, right? These planets are going and simultaneously in different types of orbits and different types of let's say circular movements, and they're all synchronized, and they're all going at unbelievable speeds, and everything is very balanced. Around the sun? Yeah, around the sun, right. And then 400-some thousand miles an hour around the polar axis. The whole universe is going around the polar axis. So, and this is information you can get from the so-called scientists. And now we can compare the brain of all these accumulated scientists on the earth to the brain of Krishna. And we can understand. So you begin with the known to understand the unknown. We know how many scientists, how many agencies, how much time, how much money was spent to put the first Sputnik into air, into this sky. And it didn't go very far from the Earth. Maybe it went about, at most, 400 miles from the Earth. In other words, the distance from here to Eugene, Oregon. And that's about the extent of research of space that scientists have done. Now, in later years, they put up the Earth station, or the satellite station, which is a lot bigger than the Sputnik, but it's still minuscule or microscopic compared to the planets. And it's been orbiting, or they can keep it orbiting for years. And it costs a tremendous amount of money. And to maintain it, first of all, to build it, and then to maintain it has cost, has required the help of thousands of scientists, right? And hundreds and thousands of people, workers. So, and that's only 400 miles from the surface of the Earth, right? So, if we compare the known to understand the unknown, we can then understand it took all these scientists, all this money, all this time, all these workers to put a little tiny satellite into the air and maintain it for a few years. But yet we see these gigantic satellites and planets and being maintained perfectly in the very specific orbits. So now we can understand the existence of God. If you say it took all this organization and skill by these scientists on the Earth to put a little Sputnik into the air, and then you say, but the whole planetary system and the whole universal system, that happened by accident, you are an idiot. You're less intelligent than a monkey. How can you say such a thing when you have an example in front of you of all the scientific research and coordination and money and governmental organizations to put a little Sputnik into the air and maintain it for 2 or 3 weeks, and then you say that what you're seeing in terms of the sun and the planets that happened by accident and there's no intelligence behind it, that is moronic. Okay, so therefore in this purport it says, and this is the main point, it says, if one considers the intelligence needed to orbit man-made satellites, one cannot be fooled into thinking that there is not a gigantic intelligence responsible for the arrangements of the various planetary systems. There is no reason to believe that all the gigantic planets float in space without the superior arrangement of a superior intelligence. This subject is clearly dealt with in the Bhagavad Gita 15:13, where the personality of Godhead says, I enter into each planet, and by my energy they stay in orbit. Were the planets not held in the grip of the personality of Godhead, they would all scatter like dust in the air. Modern scientists can only impractically explain this inconceivable strength of the personality of Godhead. This is a brilliant statement by Prabhupada. So you start with the known to understand the unknown, right? The potencies of the syllables Bhagava apply in terms of many different meanings. Through his different potent agents, the Lord protects and sustains everything. But he himself personally protects and sustains only his devotees, just as a king personally sustains and protects his own children, while entrusting the protection and sustenance of the state to various administrative agents. The Lord is the leader of his devotees, as we learn from the Bhagavad Gita, which mentions that the personality of Godhead personally instructs his loving devotees how to make certain progress on the path of devotion and thus surely approach the kingdom of God. The Lord is also the recipient of all the adoration offered by his devotees, for whom he is the objective and the goal. For his devotees, the Lord creates a favorable condition for developing a sense of transcendental love of Godhead. Sometimes he does this by taking away a devotee's material attachments by force and baffling all his material protective agents. For thus, the devotee must completely depend on the Lord's protection. In this way, the Lord proves himself the leader of his devotees. So what is being said in this paragraph in Adi Leela, chapter 2, verse 10? It's this monumental knowledge that's being given in this little paragraph. So basically, because people don't understand the breath and power of God or Krishna. They accept mediocre people as God. Mediocre people who perform a few magic tricks and befuddle them because they can produce a gold chain from their hand, which actually is coming from their sleeve. Or they can give you some ashes from a fire sacrifice, and they say you keep it in your home, you'll become rich. So by the law of averages, if they say that to 1,000 people, one of them might become rich due to their previous karma, not because of the ash. And then they publicize that, and then people think, oh, that guy's God because he got some ashes, he gave some of his ashes from his puja, and someone kept it in the house and became a millionaire. So that means he must be God. That is such a sick, trivial reasoning. But this is the way people are, because they worship God not for becoming purified, but for getting perks, materialistic perks from God, right? And if they get it from some God impersonator, then they accept that impersonator as God. Right? So, and if they don't get what they want, then they'll go to Microsoft or Amazon to get their perks. Right, you see, so it all leads to materialism, this a phony following of religion for material benefit. It leads to materialism and atheism eventually. So in this paragraph, first of all, the incredible meaning of Bhagavan is given. So it says, combining all these concepts, Bhagava, the word Bhagavan carries the import of inconceivable potency in knowledge, energy, strength, opulence, power, influence, devoid of all varieties of inferiority. Okay, so that's like the first part of this paragraph. And then the second part, it says, the Lord is the leader of his devotees. Oh no, he says, through his different potent agents, the Lord protects and sustains everything. But he himself personally protects and sustains only his devotees, just as a king personally sustains and protects his own children while entrusting the protection and sustenance of the state to various administrative agents. So that means that the demigods are in charge of taking care of all these selfish people who are engaging in self-indulgence and sense gratification, and who have rejected God and come to this world in order to become little gods, controlling some little part of material nature by manipulating their intelligence and exploiting other people and becoming like Bezos or Gates or Ellison, all these moguls of modern technology, and they exploit so many people, and they amass tremendous wealth, and then they realize, I'm not going to live enough to spend all this wealth, and then they start companies like Calico and other companies that are promising to solve the riddle of death by 2050 so that death will be optional, old age will be optional, etc. All nonsense speculations. They'll never, because you cannot overcome the laws of nature established by Krishna. Krishna says, this material energy of mine is impossible to overcome. But one who surrenders unto me can easily overcome it. So something that's impossible becomes easy. Why? Because if you become a devotee, a genuine devotee of Krishna, with under the tutelage of bona fide spiritual masters, Shiksha and Diksha gurus, then the Lord becomes your personal protector. He personally protects his devotees. And sometimes when his devotees are too slow in making spiritual advancement because they still have residual material desires, then he gives a special mercy to those devotees and takes away everything they have and makes them failures materially, so that they completely surrender to the Lord in their disrupted materialistic endeavors, even while chanting Hare Krishna. Right? And now they completely surrender unto the Lord. Because when they lose all their money and all their assets, even their own family rejects them. Right? So, so they have no choice but to completely surrender to Krishna. That's a special mercy to devotees. So there's a lot of things explained in this little paragraph, the second chapter, the Adi Lila, second chapter, 10th verse. But it's monumental information. And this is validated in many other places in the Srimad Bhagavatam. I'm not going to go through it now, it's a little bit late. But we can see how everything Prabhupada writes is pregnant with very, very special, let's say, high quality knowledge. And to unravel it requires many years of purification. Because we can read a short paragraph like that and basically not understand one damn thing and think we know it because we read it. But just reading it is not enough. You have to hear it from bona fide devotees to point it out point by point, because this is very, as I said, pregnant or very intense knowledge explained in very simple language. See, what the scientists do, they try and bluff you by making up their own words. So like they say, well, there's a miracle ingredient in toothpaste, hexachlorophene. What? Do you understand? But first of all, it's made up of Greek and Latin words. It's not an English word, right? But they make it part of the English language by borrowing from Greek and Latin, and they give their own interpretations to these words, and they hype it up with propaganda and advertising, and all of a sudden you become convinced, I can't live without hexachlorophene. It's a bunch of nonsense, right? But they're expert at it. By, like for example, there's this famous English mathematician, I think his name is Whitehead. He wrote a whole book of mathematical formulas. It's a book, right? Usually you pick up a book and you expect to read it, but there's not one word of English. It's all mathematical formulas. It's like 300-400 pages. Right? So that is a very specialized language. Maybe only about a handful of people in the world can understand that language. Just like hieroglyphics, it's a very specialized language. So this is the way they befuddle people. They come up with these words that they don't understand, and they give definitions to it that you can't verify, right? And therefore, you become befuddled. And you say, well, I heard his lecture. It was a wonderful lecture. I didn't understand a damn thing, but he must know what he's talking about. So this is the trick of the modern scientist. Just like this one, I told this story, this one 20-year-old girl who's considered a intellectual prodigy, a brilliant girl. She got a job in Microsoft in India, but Microsoft said, well, you can't really work until you get the vaccine, the corona vaccine. So she gets the vaccine, the corona vaccine. 3 days later, she's dead. And now, her parents are, completely bewildered, and you can't understand it, and they're blaming the vaccine. And then the scientists came in and said, no, it's not the fault of the vaccine. It's that she had some pre-existing conditions, and the vaccine was incompatible with those pre-existing conditions. And the parents believe it. And they gave these names, these names, the Latin, Greek names, to this pre-existing condition that they claim she had. So you can't verify it. You don't even understand what it is. And the parents believed it. So now they're on a campaign to warn everyone, you have to not be free of these preconditions in order to get the vaccine. In other words, what they're doing is they're putting these vaccines out to the public without having vetted them completely. And they're experimenting on human beings. So this girl was actually an experimental human being, right? And then after this, they say, well, if you have these it's just like you get these medicines, right? And it says, this will heal arthritis, it will heal diabetes, it'll heal your cancer. But if you have this condition, you'll die if you take it. And if you have that condition, you'll die if you take it. And if you have this other condition, you'll also die if you take it. You ever read these, what do you call that? The fine print, yeah. The devil is in the details. So, wait a minute. If you'll die because you have this condition or that condition, why would you want to even take that medicine? Maybe they missed a few, warnings, right? Like they did with this poor girl. So here we see this is all nonsense, and this is nothing new. The FDA has validated medicines and put it out in the public, and then years later, after hundreds of people have died, they say, "Oh, don't take it anymore." We made a mistake, but they're not responsible for that mistake. You can't sue them because you're not allowed to sue them. And so we see the deck is, in other words, the whole thing is made in such a way that we're helpless. So here we're hearing that if a person becomes a devotee of Krishna, Krishna personally takes care of that person. And if people don't become devotees, they're under the control of the demigods, who can be really nasty, like Mahakali. She's a really nasty person, right? She's always giving people material benefits and then taking it away from them until they go crazy and are completely frustrated and bewildered and oftentimes commit suicide. And we gave the example of the stock market crash in 1928. People were jumping, stockbrokers were jumping out of 40-story buildings and killing themselves. It happened again in 2008 when there was a stock market collapse or near collapse. People were jumping out of windows in the high. It wasn't that it was 9/11 and the whole building was on fire and they're jumping out of windows. It was a financial crisis, and because people got wiped out overnight, they jumped out of windows. That's a bankrupt person that jumps out a window and commits suicide. They don't know anything about God. They only know about money. Money is their God, and if they lose their money, they commit suicide. And they do honor killings also. They'll kill their wife and their kids as if that's honorable, right? So this one little paragraph of this purport is chock full of very specialized, high-quality knowledge. If we can assimilate even a little bit of it, our whole life changes. So therefore, we should all strive to become devotees of Krishna, to get his special attention and protection, and he also promises to give us knowledge, not by studying, but by what you call revelation. This is revelatory knowledge. But the more we surrender to the Lord, the more he reveals to us. Okay, we'll stop right there. All glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Did he do the RT already? No. Where is he? Huh? Did he come? Shri Guru Charana Padma